Welcome back to the OVNI Capital Podcast. I'm your host, Marie Autier. I'm an entrepreneur turned investor, and I'm now a general partner at OVNI Capital. My guest today once ran a $5 billion ads business at Twitter and helped shape the future of ads monetization. And yes, he also greenlit the acquisition of my startup, Aiden AI, by Twitter in 2019. I'm so delighted to say that today I'm sitting down with Bruce Falck, who was previously GM of revenue ads at Twitter and now the founder of Halcyon. Bruce, thank you so much. It's fair to say that you once ran a $5 billion ads business at Twitter. You helped shape the future of monetization in tech. You also held a number of positions at Google and BrightRoll, and now you're back to being a founder. So I want to talk about all those things, starting with where it all started. So Bruce, you were born and raised in South Africa.
Yeah.
Can you just go back to the 90s and tell me about what drove that decision from you to move over here?
Yeah, I was born in South Africa in 1971, grew up in Johannesburg, ended up at Stellenbosch, which is where my dad had studied. My dad had actually passed away when I was 13, and his desire was for me to go to Stellenbosch. Incredible university. I stumbled into computer science. My mom had said to me, just whatever you do something with computers. I went and looked at the class list, and there was a thing called Rekenaarwetenskap, because it's an Afrikaans university. Rekenaarwetenskap translates to calculator science, but that was computer science. And so I wasn't like a computer kid, you know what I mean? I had very little exposure to computers at that time, but I liked physics and maths and whatnot. So I just took a shine to computer science. I never really felt like I was as good. I felt like I was in a class with a bunch of people that were like so much smarter than me, but I was fascinated and did 3 years of that. A friend of mine had come over a couple years earlier to do a travel, like a student exchange travel thing, where kids from the Southern Hemisphere come to Northern Hemisphere ski resorts because we're summertime labor. In other words, our summertime is the US winter. And he was like, you got to do this. So I came to Sugar Bowl, worked at Sugar Bowl for a season. And at the end of the season, I just didn't want to go back to South Africa. I wanted to keep exploring. And so nearest town to Sugar Bowl was San Francisco. So I just kind of happened to land in San Francisco in 1994.
What was your first job? What's your first exposure to?
Well, I was waiting tables at Sugar Bowl, serving chili, and then I got to San Francisco, and I didn't have a visa at that point, and so I went to work at a restaurant called Pizzeria Uno, and tried to look for a job. Couldn't find a job, and eventually I got a job at Wells Fargo in technical support for online banking. Right after Wells Fargo launched wellsfargo.com.
Crazy.
And in parallel to that, a friend of mine who was an architect had started building websites. He was actually also South African, also at the ski resort. He was interning at an architecture firm and started building websites, and called me up and said, I remember you said something about computer science, and like I'm trying to figure out how to FTP something. And I'm like, I know I can help you with FTP. So I went over to this guy's office, and that was like my first time seeing the web. Like when I studied computer science, the internet was there, but the web was not. It was 1993 I graduated, right?
So you were kind of there at the time where everything happened.
Yeah,
the build up to the dot-com bubble.
By pure coincidence, right? So we started building websites, and eventually, like I was like, you know, we started just pitching anyone we could pitch, just like, we'll build your website, basically. And we literally hung up a shingle on Yahoo, and there was a section on Yahoo. Yahoo was browsable at that point. It was a directory, basically. And we just said, Phoenix Pop was the name of the company, hire us to design your website kind of thing. And one thing kind of led to another, basically. So that's how my first company got started.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
How did you go from, so you were a founder then, basically, but it probably wasn't called.
I was a founder and CEO when I was 25. That was effectively my first real job.
Okay, and how long did that last for? What's your first entrepreneurial
7 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then you kind of...
Never raised capital. I think that's maybe a key distinction is as I think about founding this company, it's so different than what I did then. So we were just bootstrapped. We just started making websites for people as a services business. We ended up working for a bunch of people that were VC funded, which was super fun. All the .coms, right? We were building .coms.
Was there a scene already back then?
Well, there wasn't initially. Like the first 95, 96, we were basically doing corporate stuff, right? We worked for HP and Samsung and Levi's and Dockers, and we were making little corporate brochureware type websites, right? But it was getting more interesting and sophisticated. Like Levi's wanted to put their catalog online, so we built their little catalog app. I mean, these are very small projects, right? But then the .com started happening, and we got a customer called wineshopper.com. These guys were like, okay, we're just two people with an idea. You're going to be our development team. We're going to go pitch Kleiner Perkins. Can you come to the meeting with us so that we can say you guys are building the website? We're like, yeah, cool. So we went down. These guys raised a $50 million Series A. So all of a sudden, like, we went from these like $25,000, $50,000 projects to like we're in the room with Kleiner Perkins, and these guys are raising $50 million and paying us a couple $1 million, I think, at the time, to build wineshopper.com. And I mean the whole thing. At that point, you're designing the logo, you're building the website, you're buying the hardware for them, you're configuring the hardware, you're helping them select a data center vendor, you're putting that stuff in the trunk of your car, driving down to their colo, bolting in the machinery, configuring their network, and like switching it on. So like we went from these little websites to like and these are like at that point you were doing these like E4500s with an Oracle database and these big Cisco switches, and it was just the dawn of the internet. And one of my earliest memories was walking into one of the colos, and there was this big room of servers, and we're like, "What's that?" And they were like, "That's Yahoo." And we're just like, "Whoa."
And after that, I want to fast forward a little bit. So you've led teams at Google, Twitter, and now you're back at founder level.
Yeah.
How does that feel?
Well, it's almost 30 years later, right?
Yeah,
so I was
exactly.
25 then. I'm 54 now. So, how
What's
does it
changed?
feel?
I mean, so many things, but just how does it feel to be, to go
Everything and nothing, it's weird. It feels so familiar to me. Like I have these moments where it just reminds me of what I felt like back then.
Muscle memory.
In terms of just like problems and things you worry about and whatever, like just this feeling of like holding it together, pulling it together. But it's just a magical time to build. So I've tried to like get a little bit back in touch. Like at the early days of Phoenix Pop, like I was the developer. Like I wrote all the stuff. I mean, it was very basic shit, right? But I wrote the code, I deployed the stuff. And so I decided when I did this company, because I'd gotten so abstracted from product building, I was a sort of a product manager and a product leader at Twitter, but I didn't, I knew the words, I didn't know these systems at all. So I decided to make a point of trying to get back into it. And I'm like I built one tiny feature on our thing, but I've made a point of learning GitHub. Like I can get pull, I can get commit, I can deploy.
Again. Yeah.
Basic stuff, but like all the stuff I used to do back then, like FTPing files onto a server, is still kind of what we do today, but now we do it with CI and whatnot.
But I'm really fascinated because, like, if you think about it, what did you learn from being inside multiple tech giants? Because there's like 30 years and also just loads of experience because you've scaled businesses. You had, $5 billion business in ads revenue. So look, when you think about first-time founders right now, what are the things that you learned when you were those tech giants that you can share with them?
I got very, very lucky and joined Google. And that was an absolutely formative experience for me.
How did that happen? Take us back.
So real briefly, the company, the Phoenix Pop, was this rocket ship that we rode all the way up and then down. I mean, I ended up going bankrupt. The company went bankrupt. We lost the company. All these .coms all of a sudden didn't have money. And I was like, but you owe me $1 million. They're like, yeah, sorry. The VC that said they were definitely going to like bridge us to the next round, like didn't.
And what you were like in your 30s at that stage? How big was the company?
I was like 31. It was like, well, we were 150 people at our peak. So we laid off to like 75 and then we laid off to like 35. And then eventually we like sold the company through like an acqui-hire type deal. And then we got stiffed on that payment because their VC, it was just fucking chaos, right? Like everything fell apart. Then I did another startup in LA that was fun, but failed. I was an early employee. We were building like an electromechanical device for solar concentration, which was actually caused my first foray into energy. So I spent 3 years doing that, 2003 to 6.
And that clean tech back then? Did you?
Yeah, that was clean tech. Yeah, that was clean tech 1.0 as they now call it. That was the original clean tech wipeout. And then I got a call from a friend who was at Google. And she was actually she was the recruiter from my company. And she's like, you got to come to Google. And she helped me get through the interview process. What
was your role?
I was product manager. And my 24th interview was with Susan Wojcicki. And Susan looked at me and said, well, you're not a product manager, but I think you could be useful around here. So I'm going to put your resume on file and call you back if something comes up. And I was like devastated, just absolutely
After 24 interviews.
fucking crushed. Yeah. At that point, I so badly wanted to go to Google. It was 2005. I just remember like you walked into Google and it was obviously electric. You can imagine, right? This is on the main campus. It's a couple thousand people back
in
then.
Silicon Valley, just
Yeah, I was like, I got to get into this fucking company. I was dead broke at the time. I was like, I got to get into this company. She called me back 6 months later and
6 months
she's
later.
like, yeah, I got something for you. And I said, well, what do you got? She's like, well, I want you to help us build this thing called TV ads. I'm like, but I don't know anything about TV or anything about ads. And she's like, exactly. Anyone who knows this stuff is going to try to rebuild the old world. We want to like reinvent the world. And she hired me. She took a chance on me. So,
and you stayed there for.
Yeah. So then I had this wild, amazing ride at Google. Again, very lucky to have. It's just so much luck involved in getting in there.
Yeah.
And the timing was good. Company went from 4,000 to 40,000 people in the 8 years that I was there. And
it's insane.
I was chatting with some friends recently. We were kind of reminiscing, and it was like your team just doubled every single year, like de facto as a rule. I mean, it was just going gangbusters. And so TV ads, I actually failed as a product manager on TV ads. They're like, you actually are not a product manager. And a guy called Mike Stibe and my friend Eileen Norton sort of, they took me under their wing and they're like, come over to the business side. And they had me go be like a general manager of this audio ads business. It really wasn't a general manager role, but like that's how I saw it. So I would always just show up as a CEO because that's all I actually knew how to do because that's what I'd done my first job really in a sense, right? And that actually turned out to be a good skill at Google is to be a GM. I think like being a GM kind of actually had like I could actually outplay these very technical product managers in a sense. So
with a founder mindset.
Just a founder mindset, yeah, and an immigrant mindset, by the way.
Totally.
I don't look like an immigrant, but I'm an immigrant. I got to America.
So
I didn't know a single fucking person here. I was here all by myself.
How'd you even get a visa?
I had no visa.
How'd you do it?
So I was illegal for a long time. And eventually I went to my lawyer I found a lawyer when we had this company. I was like, I'm not legal. She's like, okay. I said, what do I do? She said, you can actually sponsor yourself. I'm like, how do you do that? She's like, well, the company is a legal entity and the company can sponsor you even though you own the company. I was like, wow, got an H-1B visa.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, so self-sponsored H-1B.
Yeah.
Anyway, the visa story is another, I mean, like it took me like 13 years to get a green card. Just wild.
A lot of resilience though, so it does play a role.
It just was mindset. Like, yeah, exactly. Failure was not an option, right?
Yeah.
So, the key thing at Google also, so I did this TV ads business, I did this audio ads business. Then they shut down audio ads, which made a lot of sense. But then I was out of a job again. And again, my friend Eileen Norton rescued me and had me come work on this thing called the GDN at the time, the Google Display Network. And what was interesting, and again, lucky, is that was right as we had acquired DoubleClick.
Yeah.
And so I got to go work with the DoubleClick guys, putting, at that point, the DoubleClick cookie on the GDN network. And the GDN network didn't have a cookie, and so it wasn't competitive, and it just took off like a freaking rocket ship. And I don't know, it's many, many billions of dollars today. And then programmatic happened. And then as programmatic started happening, we acquired this company, Invite Media. Awesome little company. These young founders, Nat and Zach, who are incredible, have gone on to do amazing things. Zach is now a celebrity, doesn't return my calls. Nat,
I'm surprised you returned my call.
Yeah. So anyway, so we acquired Invite Media, and they like had me go help Invite Media and sort of like help take over the business. And Nat told me he was leaving the company because he only wanted to do a year there. They went on to do Flatiron Health, which I don't know if you've heard of. It was a $2 billion exit to Roche. Like, these guys are incredible. And they were young. I mean, they might have been 22 at the time. They started Invite Media in their dorm room when they were at Penn.
Yeah, only in America you hear those stories.
And I just hit it off with them. Like, I was like, they were like, we hate Google. I'm like, why? He's like, we can't get headcount. I'm like, what do you need? We need 15 heads. I'm like, why? I'm like, we can't serve the revenue. It's growing so fast. I was like, I'll get you 15 heads. So I was helpful to them, basically. And so then I learned all about programmatic. And then programmatic just sort of took off and became like a main character at Google. So I became sort of like the programmatic person. Sorry, I'm being very long-winded.
No,
Cut me
that's
off.
super interesting. Don't worry.
So I did the programmatic thing, and then eventually I just started feeling like I was very much like a middle. I mean, I was a middle manager. I wasn't feeling like I was. I actually literally, I was just like in the middle of nowhere.
You didn't have the level of
I had
leadership or authority that you wanted.
Yeah, I had this mentor, Philip Schindler, who's now he wasn't the head of business now, but he's now the head of business. And I just said, like, it's August and I'm still waiting for my head count. Like, life is too short for this bullshit, basically. And I said, I just want to go run something. I can't do this anymore. So I left Google and joined BrightRoll, literally to be a bigger fish in a smaller pond. It was very hard to do because you're taking a massive pay cut. We just bought a house. We were about to have kids. I was married. I just gotten married to my wife, who was a Googler, by the way. I met my wife at Google. Shout out, Lauren. So I joined BrightRoll to be COO, and they liked me because I ran a bunch of programmatic stuff at Google, and they were, a 400-person company that were trying to like grow and be big. And anyway, this guy, Todd Sachidoti, awesome founder, him and I had one conversation. I was like, there's no going back.
I just want to pause here for a second, because you were in a 40,000, people company, and then you go to 400 people. You were talking about being a big fish in a small pond. Sometimes founders fall into that thing in the sense that their ego gets in the way. They think they're such a big shot. How did you handle your first day to BrightRoll? What was your attitude around the company?
I mean, I just wanted to get in and learn. And I think the biggest thing that happened, the biggest immediate feeling I had at BrightRoll when I got there was, I'm only going to get paid if we realize the value of this equity. And it like was exactly what I needed. I needed to be living on the edge. Like at Google, you got liquid RSUs, you just get paid. You know what I mean? And
without any risk and adrenaline.
Yeah. I mean, look, we worked hard. We, built a lot of value and all that stuff. But you can kind of just ride along. And if you don't show up to work, nothing happens. BrightRoll felt much more real, which I liked.
Danger.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. But like consequences, you know what I mean? Like, you better fucking deliver. Anyway, so we ended up selling BrightRoll to Yahoo quite quickly, which was an awesome exit. And I'd never been involved in selling a company at that level. I got to go sit down with Marissa Meyer.
That's amazing.
And with Jackie Reeses, who was the head of corp dev there, who's this awesome exec who's become a mentor. And they bought the company for $640 million. And then that was exciting and fun, but then I ended up Yahoo, and I just didn't want to be at Yahoo, but I sort of had to stay at Yahoo.
How long was the earnout?
4 years.
4 years? Okay.
Yeah.
Just like mine at Twitter, which I thought was a long time.
Yeah. I mean, this is the biggest thing founders learn, is like selling a company is a brutal experience, and especially on the other side of it, especially on the other, and I've never done it as an actual founder, but like, it is brutal on the other side. Every founder will tell you that it's just so difficult, because you're sort of imprisoned by these earnouts, which makes sense. The acquiring company obviously like wants Marie around. That's the value, right? But like, Marie doesn't necessarily want to be there, but she has to be there because there's money involved, right? So same with
golden handcuffs.
Same with all of us. Anyway, so I got a call from a recruiter saying, "Hey, Turner's looking for a CEO." I was like, shit, that's what I want to do, but
Tell
I
us
can't.
What Turn did. Was it
Turn was not unlike BrightRoll. It was a DSP. BrightRoll was a DSP and an ad exchange that was video focused, which was clever.
Yeah. So DSP is demand side platform.
Demand side platform, which is all the way back to what Invite Media was a DSP. So I'd been running, my claim to fame is I don't know how many DSPs I ran, but quite a few, right? So 2011 is when I started at doing the DSP thing by Invite Media, which later becomes DBM. Yeah. By the way, that business, talk about acquisitions, they bought Invite Media for $80 million. Invite Media was doing 100 million top line and maybe 10 million bottom line, right? That business now at Google, I don't know exactly, but like the last I heard, it's doing $15 billion a year.
Great acquisition.
It's the greatest acquisition of all time.
And when you arrived at Turn, you were called in as a professional CEO, and you had to like reduce the size of the team by 25%.
Yeah, so I'd been the COO of BrightRoll. BrightRoll had this good exit. Turn had worked through, I think, a couple CEOs at that time. The founder had left. The other CEO, I guess, didn't work out. And I got a call from a recruiter, and this guy, Jeff Crow, was masterful in recruiting me. And I was like, I cannot walk away from this, Jeff. And he basically sat me down and said, you just told me that this is your dream job, and you're telling me you can't take your dream job over like a little bit of money. I'm like, it's not a little bit of money, it's a lot of money. I'm like, but you you will be running Turn. It'll be your company, and that's up to you to make the money. This went on for like 3 or 4 months.
And even that did it ever cross your mind?
It was exactly 10 years ago. It was like June of 2015 that Jeff was recruiting me, and I started in September of.
Were you fine with, some people like to start companies and like to be the co-founders or whatever. Were you fine being a professional CEO?
At that time, I really loved the BrightRoll experience. I was like, BrightRoll was high. BrightRoll had a sense of danger, like your choice of words there, but was also de-risked.
Mm-hmm.
So it was kind of like the right size and shape. I was like, what could they were doing $30 million in EBITDA. I was like, what could possibly go wrong?
Yeah.
Turns out a lot can fucking go wrong, right? Like that exit was great, but it was so lucky because Yahoo was the last exit on that freeway. There's not been a DSP bought ever since then, except that's not true. I sold Turn. Anyway, so Turn was a very interesting company. They had an awesome product, an awesome engineering team. They were kind of more focused than BrightRoll, but they were sort of old school relative to BrightRoll.
What stage were they at? Because I know how much you sold them for to Moby, but I'm just curious, when you arrived, what had they raised?
There was one of the problems, right? So they'd raised an E of $80 million in advance of going public and had raised a total of $150 million of capital, which they'd burned through.
So yeah, in
like they
2015,
had a big office in New York. I mean, they were planning to go public, and it just didn't work out.
And also, I think it's interesting because I was working for an ad tech company back then, and I think what's interesting is that back then the market was super, ripe for IPOs, and there was this faith and optimism around it. The company I worked at tried to IPO and they failed.
What year?
2014.
Yeah.
2015 actually, when it didn't work out. It was called Fixed2, based in Boston.
So same timeline. So Turn had raised $80 million in 2014. They were just going for it, right? They were, and they were just like running out of money. Like they had 3 months of cash left. So I laid off like a quarter of the company within 90 days. And I said to the board, you guys figure out how to put more money in here. I just got here. Or I'm out, basically.
So you came in with that mandate of just being George Clooney up in the air.
After I got there, they're not going to tell you that on the way in. It's always the case. They were up front, but I mean, you always find some stuff out, and so it was tight. So again, Jeff Crow, who has just been amazing throughout and is still an amazing mentor to me. He's like very paternal,
I love that.
I just called him in. I was like, please, can you just talk to all existing investors and get me $15 million so that we can even have a crack at success here? Otherwise, this thing's going down. And we did that. And then we got approached by Singtel, and they made a good offer. And that was maybe one of my most painful experiences. We got all the way to board approval, and then they came back and said the board didn't approve. I'm like, that doesn't happen. So I'd gotten my management team over the fence at that point. We're getting acquired by Singtel. The offer was $450. Wasn't great, but it was like, fine, let's do this. Like, our business was struggling at the time, and I think that's maybe worth just touching on. There was a company called The Trade Desk.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The Trade Desk and Turn were battling it out, and they were the alternate to DBM, which was the Google, the thing that I'd run at Google. The big monster was DBM, and the world needed an alternate. And Turn had at a point decided we need to do what Google is doing and go customer direct. We need to go round our agency partners. And the Trade Desk were like, what if we just go to the agencies and swear an allegiance to them? And the agencies were like, cool. We're going to take all Turn's budget and we're going to move it to the Trade Desk. Turn went down. Trade Desk took off. Trade Desk is now worth $50 billion. Turn sold eventually for 325. So like, that's just for me like an incredible story of how like outcomes diverged. And Turn was dominant relative to Trade Desk for quite a few years.
So that's fascinating because we always read the news and, there was an acquisition with a big number and people get really mesmerized with that. They don't understand what happens,
Yeah, and 325 is not a great outcome if you've raised 150.
Absolutely.
It was a great outcome under the circumstances. Like we landed the plane, but it was
Yeah. So then you moved to Twitter after that.
Crazy thing happened, right? So initially the acquisition was, we want you to be the CEO of the combined companies. So Singtel had a company called Amabi. We're going to merge you guys. Bruce, you're going to be the CEO. Then they came back and they're like, you're not going to be CEO anymore. No explanation. I'm like, okay. And you're not going to have a role anymore. I'm like, okay, but I've got to get my team to go join their team when I'm not joining their team. So that was kind of painful. It actually worked out well for me because I got my acceleration and whatever else. And I was out of a job. So I was sitting there kind of bored and stressed and waiting for this deal to close. And I got a call from a recruiter. And the guy's like, Twitter's looking for like a head of ads. We call it a GM role. I'm like, what does a GM role mean? It's like, you run all of product and engineering for ads plus all the things that make revenue at the company. And you'd be reporting to Jack Dorsey. Would you be open to a conversation? I was like, yeah. Why not? I mean, that's like not what if you think about my trajectory was not to go back to like a quote unquote big company, right? So they're like, okay, we're going to connect you with this guy called Omid. And I'm like, wow, Omid. So Omid was this first business hire at Google. He's a big deal. And I talked to Omid. And what did Omid say to me? He said to me, he asked me this very interesting question. He said, are you more like Neil Mohan or Nikesh? And I was like, I'm more like Nikesh, meaning I was more on the business side than the product side.
Interesting.
And he's like, oh, we're looking for someone like Neil. But why don't you come in anyway? I was like, okay.
Only in San Francisco you get those stories.
Yeah. Well, the thing I learned afterwards is that Omid had obviously done some background checking on me and called Philip Schindler. And Philip's like, Bruce is great. Shout out to Philip Schindler. Also been a big supporter over the years. Love that guy.
So you're back in a company that's like 3,000 people back then?
So I sit down with Jack and Omid, thinking like I've already screened myself out, right? I've already told them I'm not what they're looking for. But what they liked about me was I'd been a CEO and I'd been a founder.
For sure.
Right. And they wanted a GM, and this was like a turnaround situation. So
what year was this? Remind us.
This is now 2017, April 2017.
Okay, yeah.
So my key qualification actually in that situation was having been a founder. I vibed with Jack. And
Jack just came back, right?
Jack had been back a year, and Jack at this point the whole management team had left, and he was in full rebuild mode. I mean, he was hiring all the key roles from scratch again, basically.
Yeah, Twitter has a lot of drama before.
They tried to sell to Disney at the end of 2016, as I understand. That deal had failed, and now Jack was like stuck with the company. It was supposed to be like a short-term gig, and now he was there as a half-time CEO, full-time, basically,
so probably
forever.
Needed founders around.
I didn't know that. I hadn't thought about that, but that was one element. But the bigger element was when they asked me to tell a story about Turn, the whole story was about turning around Turn. And they were like, this guy's a turnaround person.
We need someone who's comfortable with chaos.
My differentiator at Google, by the way, was I always did the project nobody else wanted to do. Like audio ads was a total bastard child. Nobody wanted to touch it.
Said every immigrant, by the way.
Yeah, exactly, right? I'm telling you, it's a huge advantage, yeah. Anyway, so
totally agree.
So I ended up at Twitter in this role, and it was unfamiliar territory. Like I'd never run I'd run a big engineering team as the CEO of, but and I'd been working with engineers for 25 years at that point, but I'd never run a big like 400 person product and engineering team, right? I was like, holy shit, this is wild. And anyway, I got the job. They called me. They were like, we love you. I was like, wow, this can't be happening. And then I talked to my, I wasn't sure about whether I should do it or not. I was like, this is not what I want to do. I don't want to go back to a big company.
And I also want to talk about the context in which you joined, because, Ben Horowitz says you have wartime CEOs and peacetime CEOs, but Twitter wasn't in great shape. They were looking to, exactly to your point, they like your experience as someone who's able to turn around the situation. Yeah. So they're looking for that type of people who can thrive in chaos and turn chaos into success. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, I spent an hour with Jack and Omid. It was just an awesome, super chill. By the way, we're sitting on couches almost exactly like this. Might have been these same fucking couches for all I know, because we got these secondhand in the Twitter conference room there. I'd never met Jack. Obviously, it was cool meeting Jack. He was very quiet, and he's like, "Hey, we have a board meeting next week. Can you come to New York? I know you haven't started yet. I'm sorry, but would you be kind enough to come and join for the board meeting?" I'm like, "Fuck yeah, I'll come to the board meeting in New York." And there I was on the management team of Twitter. I just couldn't believe it. Could not believe it, yeah.
It's incredible. And about that, so I'm not going to go into too many details, because we obviously know that there's NDAs or whatever, but...
I don't give a fuck about my NDA.
Well, in which case, can you tell us, I was obviously here, and just to put things into context, thank you so much, because you're the one who sponsored the acquisition of Aiden AI, which is my company. And I'm also fascinated because you had a lot of experience selling, a company, being on and also internally just being the one who approves of acquisitions. So you've probably in your career, you've seen tens of acquisitions.
Never bought companies. Well, I'd been loosely involved at Google in buying companies. Like at one point, we were going to buy Criteo when I was at Google.
Wow.
I was in those conversations.
Bloody hell.
And Google bought 1 million companies at that point. We're just buying companies all the time. But this is my first time okay, I'm responsible for buying this company, and learned a ton from that experience as well.
Well, I come from Europe and we don't have the equivalents of the Googles who just buy a shit ton of companies. Of course, there is an acquisition
Even Twitter
market.
was buying a shit ton of companies. At the time, Twitter had bought so many companies. I was like, please stop buying companies.
I hope you didn't say that when we came up.
Well, it took a while before we didn't buy anything for a couple of years because I was like, we had bought Telepart and we had bought Mopub and we had bought Gnip. My whole team was freaking acquisitions, and some of them were contentious and not going well, whatnot.
Well, as a matter of fact, I can tell you one thing is that I know we arrived in a sort of short window because afterwards COVID hits, and there were some acquisitions, but a lot less activity.
Well, you guys, there was nothing much before 2019. For a couple of years, I did nothing, and then I did two. One was right before COVID, and then the other one was our friend Jeff Marshall and Cross Install, which happened like. I met him in the office, and then COVID happened, and we did the deal. We did the deal over video conferences, and those guys never ever came to the office.
Well, credit to you for not canceling that.
I didn't meet Jeff in person from that time for like a couple of years.
But even then, like a lot of M&A teams just stopped buying companies, and you kind of went with it. And I'm sure Jeff feels really grateful about that. So taking you back to that time, so you were talking about golden handcuffs. I had to stay for 4 years as well, and I ended up actually leaving after 3 because of the change of leadership. But how did it feel for you? Like, you spend so much time, sweat and dedication, and, Twitter had a very special, unique culture where you really bonded with the people you worked with. And, in May, you got asked to leave before the whole hostile takeover took place. How did that feel for you?
Not good.
I bet. But you wake up and literally get asked to call your mum, and, it's going to be out in the news.
I mean, I had a meeting with the CEO. I've been there 5 years at this point, and Elon had shown up, and we had an offer to sell the company, right? And I got a phone call I had a one-on-one with the CEO, and he showed up with the HR person and said, we've decided you're not going to be part of the company. I couldn't believe it, basically. And it was a big media event, as you say. The head of, Leslie, the CMO, was like, hey, you need to tell your mom about this. I'm like, why'd I have to tell my mom? She's like, it's going to be all over the news in the morning. I mean, I'm like, my mom's not going to see it. She's in South Africa. She's like, no, this is going to be a global news event. I was like, wow, really? And it was a fucking global news event. It was a global news event because Parag had made this move to fire myself and Kayvon after Twitter was just in the news 24/7 because Elon was at that point, like, it was becoming a hostile takeover, right? He was going to buy the company, then not buy the company, and then he started like trashing the company. And right in the middle of that, Parag fires the 2 product leaders who've been the 2 product leaders for like the last 5 years, basically. So anyway, that was kind of crazy.
And even if you're used to chaos, I do feel like there is no equivalent. Even I, was struggling to explain the situation as just, an acquired founder, but I can't imagine what it's like for you. How does do people understand the level of violence it is? Even if you had like 30 years of chaos, I'm betting that must have felt quite special.
Well, I think the more interesting piece was for me, what was happening up until that point was trying to lead the company through this thing. And I was...
You were great, by the way. I remember your leadership just shown really brightly and I think listening to you now, it's because you had so much experience running companies.
I was initially excited about Elon buying Twitter. I was like, he's going to give his company a huge kick in the pants. He's technical. He's going to understand the fundamentals.
It looked good on paper.
He's going to take us private. At that point, I spent, I was like, I'd been watching the SpaceX evolution. I did then, and I still watch all the like SpaceX rocket launches. And I was like, this could be really interesting and exciting and fun, And of course, there were a lot of people on the teams that had a lot of consternation. And basically what I told my teams is like, look, you have a choice to make. When he shows up, you can decide to be part of the company and you can decide not to be part of the company. Some people are going to be down for that adventure. And some people are not. Now, I was naive. I had no idea what was ultimately going to happen and
no one knew
insane it was going to end up being. And it's kind of, in a sense, a little sad what happened. I think under different circumstances, it might have worked out. There were a lot of dynamics at play. I think the untold story, by the way, I keep trying to tell a story nobody's biting, but the untold story actually is that the Apple ATT tracking change, right? The Apple's privacy changes that happened, I want to say, beginning of 2021. Resulted in a delayed impact on the stock prices of anybody that depended on Apple ATT, which included Facebook, Twitter, Snap, Pinterest, and any of the social in-feed social apps, right? And by the end of the year, the penny had kind of dropped for analysts that this was a big fucking deal. And Facebook said on their earnings call, by the way, we just have to disclose, we think it's going to cost us $10 billion in revenue in 2022. And if you dig up the stock charts of all those companies at that time, that is when they drop, and they dropped 50%. So Twitter went from $70 a share to $35 a share overnight. Boom. Right. And we're in the middle of this turnaround, and we're in the middle of the sprint to like grow the company, grow the revenue. We're like going for it. We're like fucking going for it. Now, why that matters is when the stock gets cut in half, Twitter's a $30 billion company, not a $60 billion company. So Elon can afford a $30 billion company and pay a premium on top, but he couldn't have bought Twitter were it not for ATT. So we have Tim Cook to thank for Elon owning Twitter.
That's a unique take.
And then, of course, when the stock tanked, Elon was like, oh shit, I'm overpaying here, right? And like probably anyone would have done that. They would have tried to get out of the deal, and he tried to get out of the deal, and it didn't work out. So by the time the deal culminated, I think it ended up just being very bitter for him that he was forced to buy the company. His fault, he signed a contract and whatnot. But it got very, very ugly very quickly.
Absolutely. And I think it's one of the rare occasions where the media wasn't really dramatizing things. I think the media was actually probably using euphemism as to what people who were left inside felt. And I want to thank you for one thing. I don't know if you know that, but actually you're the reason I got my visa to move to the US. And I remember going to the embassy in London.
I remember talking about it.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, for me, it had been 18 months. It took bloody ages because back then we were all remote. So there was like, no one was approving of transfers. And actually, unfortunately, I heard the news about you no longer being at the company. And I literally was going to the embassy.
Crazy.
Yeah.
At the time.
Yeah, your name was on it. And I was just like,
oh,
am
shit.
I not going to move? And I was just thinking, oh, bloody hell. And I was really upset that you weren't around anymore. But there was a really unique moment for me where I thought, well, who's going to be left if they're getting rid of the founders? Because Kayvon built Periscope, didn't he?
Yeah.
Right. So as a founder, selfishly, I was thinking about, can we still have a bit of founder energy? But yeah, and then you're starting a new company now. Can you tell us a bit more about Halcyon? Yeah,
so I was like wandered around in the world for a year trying to figure out what to do. I wanted to start a company, but at the time my wife wasn't supportive. So I was like, well, maybe I should go get a job. I ended up talking to like, all the various, usual suspects that had big ads team, Facebook, Snap, Pinterest, Google, Amazon.
And just on that, if you don't mind, I think it's super important. Throughout our lives, when we want to be a founder, we have to think about financing our risk. And, as you have kids,
it's opportunity cost,
It is opportunity cost. And I think it's important to think that sometimes even if you still have it in you and you want to start another company, it's not always easy because you're
I mean, your circumstances are different when you're 54 versus, I've got 3 kids, 5, 8, and 10, and whatnot. Anyway, strangely enough, once you start working at a big company making a lot of money, you become sort of you're kind of stuck a little bit in that. You're entrapped. So I tried to find a big company job, couldn't find one, and then I had this experience early 2023 where I was either talking to recruiters or I was talking to founders, and the founders I was talking to were all people from my old team because Twitter got vaporized effectively.
Yes.
And a bunch of people went and got jobs and a bunch of people started companies. So, there was this guy, Ian was starting a company, Anna Weber was starting a company, Sarah Bakepore was starting a company, Kayvon was starting a company. Our friend Mo had started a company a couple of years before us. Anyway, it's like, I had like every day, all day, I was talking to all these people starting companies and they're raising money. And when I talked to those people, I got very energized. And when I talked to recruiters, I got very depressed. They're like, tell me about your background, And I remember talking about this to the senior recruiter at Google, right? This guy, Philip Schindler, introduces me to this very senior recruiter at Google. And she says, tell me about your background. No one here has heard of you. And I'm like,
when you've been in the New York Times multiple times.
I mean, listen, I've been out of the company many years, but I was like, holy shit, right? It's like Google's changed. Anyway, so that was just very depressing. I felt like basically I was fresh off the boat again.
So interesting.
And I'd never done anything. And I was like starting from scratch. And I was having like sell myself and explain myself.
Which is a crazy thing to imagine when you've had so many. I mean, your CV.
Well, and every recruiter's number one question is like, well, tell me about why you got fired from Twitter. I mean, that's all they knew about me. I mean, if you look me up, that's the headline, right? So it's like, but what about what we did at Twitter? We like quadrupled the business over 5 years. We quadrupled stock price over 5 years. We hit a $6 billion run rate. Can't help saying that in Q4 of 2021. I mean, like we did a lot of stuff, right? But at that point, like the Twitter name was so tarnished. I mean, every podcaster was out there.
So you were back to kind of, day one, almost.
So then I'm like, okay, fine. My wife eventually is like, okay, start a company then. You know what I mean? And
thank you, Lauren, for letting him.
My friend Andrew Beebe, shout out to Andrew, sort of, had me come over to his office at Obvious Ventures and sat me down and said, I'm going to tell you like all about all the companies we've invested in. He's like, you got to come do something in the clean tech space. And that was so helpful to me. It like got my juices flowing. And I was like, I really like this area. And he's like, oh, you should talk to these two founders. So I just started talking to founders, right? And what should I do? What should I build? What should I do? What should I build? And one question leads to another. And it's just like sitting in my room by myself for 3 months, just talking to people basically, and emailing people and just meeting people and like reading and like
trying to be open again and seeing what's out there and
just asking questions basically. I spent 3 months asking questions and had a very formative conversation with this guy Alex Classic, who is a friend of my wife, who's now our chief data officer at the company, but at the time was just a friend. And he helped me sort of like steer away from an idea around carbon credits that was really bad. He like told me multiple times, you definitely should not do this idea. And eventually I was like, well, what should I do? And we were just kind of brainstorming and spitballing, and he actually introduced me. So I was like, let me talk to some potential customers. And that's when it started to happen. I started to see an opportunity.
And how can you tell us about what you're doing right now? I know you're using AI to map out the 50 different states where the energy flows, but I'd love to hear it with your...
Yeah, so we've aggregated all the public utility commissions, and the way I say it is we're using AI to unlock data and insights for decision makers in the energy space. So anyone navigating the energy transition has to contemplate energy regulatory, because regulatory is how budgets get decided, basically. Mm-hmm. And we just had high conviction early on. Along the way through Andrew, also met my co-founder Nat Bullard, and luckily was able to pull in this engineer Alex Huros, who is an ex Twitter guy, who was just absolutely instrumental in like the earliest days of building the very, very first thing.
And now you've raised a couple of rounds, I think a pre-seed and seed. Can you tell us?
Yeah, so I started to talk to angels and got a little bit of money to sort of start paying people in late 23, and got enough of a team together and enough of I literally wrote down on my notepad one day, I'm like, what have I got? I'm like, I've got a little bit of an idea. I got a little bit of a team. I've got a little bit of interest from investors. And I've got a little bit of interest from customers. And I was like, I got something here, you know what I mean? Like, let's make a deck and go raise money. And then we're like, well, let's figure out exactly what we have to go raise money. So we went and raised a seed from Obvious Ventures and Congruent. So we raised $800K in angel, and then we raised $10 million in seed.
And the angels were mostly people from your network previously.
It was Kayvon from Twitter. It was Vidya from Twitter. It was Mike Montana
and
from
Peter
Twitter.
Peter Lenker as well, who's the
Peter Lenker from Twitter.
The M&A team
from Twitter. Peter, shout out to Twitter.
Hi, Peter.
And then Sridhar, who's been a mentor to me, put some money in. Patrick Pichette, who was on the board, on the board of Twitter
and Google before.
French Canadian. He was on the board of Twitter, and he was the CFO.
CFO of Google, yeah.
And so. I managed to scrape, and we had so little back then, but we had a good team, and this guy Abe from Congruent, who's been really helpful, said to me early on, like, at this stage, it's just team and a dream. I'm like, we got a team and we got a dream. You know what I mean? He's like, okay, I think you guys will figure something out.
I could talk to you for hours, Bruce, but I'm also conscious that time is money and you're going to get back to work. We're in your beautiful offices, by the way. And I love that you have a lot of furniture that's secondhand from Twitter. So there's a nice link between the two. And I'll switch to rapid fire round. So I do want to ask you a question about what was the hardest? Is it, figuring out the ads business at Twitter or building an AI startup in 2025?
The building a startup is like 10,000 times harder than ever joining a company that is going, because you have to make something out of
nothing,
thin air. You know what I mean?
Creating
anybody
momentum.
Can do it. All you have to do is come up with a name for a company, make an LLC, and try to come up with something that you can build that the world needs. But that is the hard part, right? And my CTO, Alex, says it really well, which is like, if you can tell me the customer problem, I can engineer a solution. You have to go out into the world and find an unsolved problem. It's got to be a big enough problem that, like, if you solve it, they will actually give you money, even though they're giving a lot of other people some of their money. It's got to be that good. It's that simple.
I love that.
It's not complicated, right? It's very simple, but it's not easy.
I'll add something at the stage of your career.
Yeah.
I think you need to also destroy your ego.
Big time.
Which isn't that easy, and you've done it multiple times, so credit to you for doing that.
I had to fail. I failed, like, my first year doing this was just constant failure. I was just like, to the point where I was like, wow, maybe I just am a total fraud and I don't know anything, and I've just been LARPing this whole fucking time, right? Because I apparently don't know how to come up with an idea. But yeah, that was like the most interesting part for me.
And I think that's what's keeping a lot of people starting companies, because even just like thinking about years spent at Google, you have people who've spent a couple of years at Google and they're never able to take a risk ever again because they're so enamored with the version of themselves before. So destruction of your self-identity and rebuilding from scratch.
Yeah.
So your LinkedIn profile says, get stuff done. That's your thing. What's one thing that you refuse to delegate?
By the way, I'm a delegator to a fault. That's kind of my style. Like, I know there's like other product managers that are very micromanagey. Yeah. I'm like a delegator I'm a delegator to a fault sometimes. Like,
and I love that. That's why I felt comfortable working with Twitter, because of you. Because I was so worried that I'd work for a company after the acquisition that wouldn't let me be who I am. Yeah. And that's, I think, great.
I mean, like, I played a lot of team sports, so like team sports is like always my metaphor, and I think that's been true of this company. Like, as the team has come together, we've gotten better and better and better. But it's not because it's just me; it's because of the team, basically. Like, I don't know much about energy. I can't code like Alex can. I don't know how to like go out into the world with this idea the way my partner Nat does. You know, my comms lead is like obviously better than me. Like all these people, I'm still what I was back then. Like, I'm a general manager. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
you're good at letting other people take the front seat.
You got to get the right team on the basketball court, and you got to let them play well, and you got to constantly make changes to the team until they're playing really well. Basically,
do you see yourself as a coach or as one of the players, or both?
Maybe a bit more of a coach. But the thing I shouldn't delegate, although I do it to a fault as well, is customer understanding. I think that's the thing the founder really has to do that. Yeah. So that's my self critique. That's where I can keep doing better. It's just more customer understanding.
I love that. If you could time travel, what advice would the South African Bruce from Joburg want to give to his future self?
I have no idea. It's hard to even think back to
that time.
I actually loved the South African Bruce because I was just fearless, naive, and just kind of like went out into the world. Like, I think I'm proud of, like, how I did that, basically.
How do you not become cynical when you've seen all the stuff you've seen?
I have become cynical. Yeah.
But how do you cure yourself from it? Do you hang out? Do you play hide and seek with the kiddos?
Yeah. I think actually doing the startup has been, you know, I did the big company thing for such a long time that you just become sort of jaded. And you just have this feeling like it doesn't really matter if I show up, and you get kind of cynical because of that. So I think building, I actually got into a hobby of building model helicopters when I was at Twitter.
At Twitter, yeah.
Through this guy, Dantley, who is our design lead.
Yeah.
And he's like, you should just build helicopters, like do something with your hands. And I just became obsessed and loved it. And it's just building is very, very grounding. Yeah. Building is real. You know what I mean?
Yes.
It's real.
It's concrete.
So much of the stuff is just, you know, emailing and meetings and politicking and whatever else. It's just, there's no substance to it. Like, building is actually substance.
I love that. That's a fantastic way to end the podcast.
Yeah.
Go build. Thank you so
Awesome.
much, Bruce. It's been such a pleasure and an honor to be here. And thank you for welcoming us in your beautiful offices in San Francisco. We'll probably be back very soon.
Can't wait. You guys, this is Mikasa Sukasa, right? You guys can come hang out here. We've got lots of spare space anytime you want.
Thank you so much.
Cool.